Topic for today is when to take inject and when to tumor. You know, like in the very beginning of the game in your opener. And I got myself a bunch of replays testing the different things. And we're just gonna go through them each. And you can do stuff like this on your own. Like it's super easy to just test something like this on your own with an AI. You don't even need to be playing versus anybody because stuff like this is like so early in the game. It's really like not influenced at all by your opponent. But I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about like why people go tumor and inject in the opener and why people double inject. And people will say stuff like, oh, you can't spend that larva, which is technically true, but what they mean is like you can't spend it immediately. And I've done this too where I've said like, oh, you can't spend the larva. Like it's hard to not be like absolute when talking about this stuff, but it's a little bit more complicated than just being able to spend it, not being able to spend it. But that said, there are like things you should never do and things that are like debatably bad. So a lot of this will be with the 30 hatch because that's where tumor injects started basically. Back in the day, like early legacy days, people didn't even do 30 hatch. This wasn't a thing. And you would just naturally get your queens up, you double inject, you would then get your third base after the fact, after you got all your queens, and then you kind of escorted it with your queens down to the 30. And you know, it was chill. But when people started going 30 hatch, they realized, man, these 300 minerals are making this real hard to spend my money. I'm gonna tumor with it, right? That's a super simple idea, right? We have 300 money into a hatchery, let's tumor, because we can't spend everything all at once. But it's not as simple as like you just can't spend it, right? So let's see exactly what we're dealing with. This is a very standard opener example. One tumor, one inject. This is the first inject. Pop them. Boom. We got 5 larvae, and we can spend it right away. I'm being bad right now, but I have the money. What's that? 312? Let's see if we can go. I think it pops at like 309 or something. 307. And we have the money like right away. There's like a 1 larva we can't spend. So okay, cool. 1 tumor seems pretty good. But what if we went double inject? How long would it take to spend it? Because eventually we would have the money. So how long would it take to spend double inject? Poop, both pop. Instead of 5 larvae, we have 8. But it takes like 318 to finally spend everything. Because we're riding out on that residual larva for a while there. So it's not terrible, right? We end up spending all the larvae in the end. So you can't say you can't spend it all. You can spend the money. It just takes a little while to get there. But is being able to spend all that larva, you know, because this is like technically 3 larvae more than we would have gotten. Right now, there's no difference in larvae, like in how much you can spend. It's only after 309 where you can finally spend the drones, and it's like new larvae that you wouldn't have had with tumor inject. But is this 3 larvae worth this tumor? That is basically the question you have to ask yourself. So it takes 9 full seconds to actually fully realize those 3 extra larvae versus just having the tumor down earlier, which if you put down the tumor, it would have been like out to here. And you know, there's a lot of things that go into that, like the Reaper harassing you. Is it easier to be here at this time than it would have been to be here? Is your queen in range? Do you want to go through that? There's a lot of different aspects that go into whether or not it's worth it. But I also want to add in OV speed to this, because OV speed, while third hatch at 30 now is like a very much a staple in a lot of Zerg's play, OV speed is something not everyone does, and it's kind of mixed in. But people might not realize how much of a difference OP speed makes in this too. Because, what was it, 309 tumor inject, and then it was like 318 with double inject to finally spend all your larvae. But how long does it take doing tumor inject with an OV speed? How bad is it really? Just look at the top right and let's make sure you have the money, because I'm not going to play perfectly here. So, inject pops, that's 6 larvae. 3, 2, looks like we can finally get it now. Ooh, I bottomed out like right on time. Okay, 320 with tumor inject. That's a little bit later than the double inject with nothing at all. That kind of gives some perspective on the money situation. It's 2 seconds later than double inject was as far as being able to spend all my larvae. That's only 1 inject. How slow is double inject with OV speed? If it took 2 seconds longer with 1 inject, then surely double inject with OV speed must be a while. Keep in mind, we're spending the money. The money is spent every time. But how long does it take to spend all of this? 8 larvae. That's a lot to go through. Let's say my OV is perfectly timed. Let's pretend. Then it would be now. It would be 328. Okay, 8 seconds. So where are we at right now? We have tumor inject is 309 raw, and then with OV speed, inject is OV. With OV speed is 328, and then tumor inject was 322. I believe inject was just 320. Is that a full 20 seconds to spend all of your larvae? 306. It's a little bit more than. That's 22 seconds to spend all your money. So like, is that a lot? Yeah, that's a lot. Going double inject and then going OV speed is probably something you don't really want to be doing. Is going double inject with no OV speed, nothing at all worth doing. 320, it's not the worst in the world. You get a little bit more drones out of it. It really comes down to preference. I think a lot of people would much prefer their injects be tumors in the beginning of the game. It's kind of an interesting thing because I see a lot of people who are like either super anti-tumor or super pro-tumor. And I think it's because of what they see people do. They'll see their favorite player go tumor right away. And this is the thing in ZVP too. It's pretty much just any matchup, not ZVZ. I think the only time going tumor first ZVZ was popular was like when the nat was so bad you'd have to tumor to be able to wall off if you're going like +1 layer. But it was more, you know, just for defensive capabilities more than anything. It really wasn't like a money thing, like you were making your base so quickly. So it's kind of, you know, a whatever point. And this kind of thought of like, I'm starting the game with this excessive amount of money into something not larva related, so I'm gonna tumor, doesn't stop just at making a base. This could also apply to, you know, making double queen. I've seen people do that before. OV speed to me is probably the absolute best time to get tumor if you're gonna get tumor ever at all. But double inject without OV speed I think is okay. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think a lot of people are quick to kind of throw it away. I personally love doing tumor first just because I can get a nice angle on the creep and then, you know, start spreading really fast. And the further I get to a ramp like this, it's even better for defenses rather than just starting here, and they can really close in on you. If you have a buddy who loves doing double inject, it's not the worst thing in the world, I feel. Get a couple more drones. A lot of people will talk about like queen timings, like what the best queen timing, especially in ZVP. You'll see players who will go like later third queen in ZVP just for the sake of spending all their larvae. I've seen a player named Denver who specifically makes later third queen than I've seen most people, just because of that fact. I think that's something people kind of underrate because you'll have people saying, oh, you have to spend your larva immediately. Surely you want to go tumor inject, and you know, that extra larva from inject isn't worth it because it's spent so late. But really, when people go really quick third queen in ZVP, you're basically doing the same thing. You're floating on larva for a long time. I go pretty quick third queen in ZVP, and I float larva like hell. The only reason everyone gets such quick queens in ZVT is just because you need them defensively. They're so powerful defensively. But if you have a choice, I think a lot of people would prefer a later third queen once they realize how much money it's clogging up. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about. Just a little